Camille tells Juliette that Lucas and Kennedy lost their suits to a rush seal job. Juliette already knows that's a lie, because she heard the same gunfire over the same radio Camille is holding when it happened. That one exchange, tucked into the back half of episode 7, says more about how information actually moves through Silo 18 than anything the algorithm says out loud all season. Juliette sends Lucas and Patrick Kennedy out at night instead of at dawn, breaking from the schedule the algorithm had approved, because she no longer trusts Camille with the real timeline. The two men make it maybe a few hundred yards from the silo door before a whining mechanical sound closes in on them. Gunfire follows. Then the radio drops to static. Camille goes straight to the vault and asks the algorithm what happened. It gives her one word back: neutralized. The algorithm doesn't stop at the one word either. It goes further and tells Camille that even with the primary safeguard compromised, a backup network stays active and ready to kill anyone who threatens the order between silos. That's the argument the algorithm is actually making with these two deaths. They're supposed to prove Juliette's plan only buys her people a short reprieve. Whatever gets shut down inside Judicial, the backup keeps running underneath it, permanently. A report that would normally read as tragic news is being used as leverage, aimed at getting Camille to talk Juliette out of finishing the job. Juliette doesn't accept that word, and there's real reason not to. Whatever hit Lucas and Kennedy wasn't a person standing there with a rifle. The sound both men describe right before the shooting starts reads closer to a drone or an automated turret than to footsteps or voices. A turret doesn't need a human witness to fire on a target, and it doesn't need a human witness to report back that the target is down. If the weapon that killed them and the system that told the algorithm they were dead are the same system, then the algorithm never actually confirmed anything with its own senses. It repeated what its own hardware told it and treated the repetition as fact. There's a second possibility too, and it comes from the season's other timeline. In the before times, Charlotte's aircraft over Iran gets disabled by a strange substance that shuts down every electronic system on board while leaving Charlotte herself unharmed. Lucas and Kennedy's helmets go dark in almost the same way. No visual feed, no distress call, just silence. Gunfire explains the silence. It doesn't explain why both men's equipment failed at the exact same instant, or why neither suit logged an impact before it died. If whatever grounded Charlotte's plane made its way into the modern safeguard system, neutralized might not mean bullets at all. It might mean the same kind of total shutdown that took out the aircraft, staged from a distance to look like a kill. Either way, the algorithm reported a death it never actually witnessed, and reported it with total confidence. Camille repeated that confidence to Juliette as settled fact. Juliette, 3 seasons into learning not to trust a single word out of that vault, was the only person in the room who treated neutralized as a claim instead of a conclusion. By the end of the hour, Kennedy is alive, using Lucas's own helmet radio to reach Martha, confirming that the children in Silo 17 are safe and saying nothing at all about what happened to Lucas. That silence is doing real work. Writers leave a detail like that in a scene when the character delivering it genuinely doesn't know the answer yet. Camille's own choice a few scenes later makes the picture messier. She knows, because the algorithm told her, that Lucas and Kennedy were shot at. She tells Juliette they weren't, blaming faulty suits instead. That's Camille, standing 3 feet from Juliette, choosing to lie about something the algorithm had already reported correctly. 2 separate failure points sit right next to each other in that one scene. A machine that can be fed bad information by its own weapons and repeated as fact, and a person who edits true information before it ever reaches the people who need it. Juliette's fight all season has been framed as one long argument against the algorithm. Episode 7 is a reminder that Camille is running her own agenda underneath it, and that agenda doesn't always line up with the system she supposedly answers to. Camille's other project this episode makes the same point from a different angle. She starts moving vitamin D+, the memory-suppressing compound, into Silo 18's water supply, which means thousands of residents are being dosed without any idea it's happening. Bernard, working an angle of his own, gets Juliette a diary written roughly 140 years earlier by a rebel named Mission, describing in plain terms how the same drug slowly stripped a man of his ability to think clearly before he even realized it was happening. That diary is what finally convinces Juliette that her rebellion doesn't need to lose a single fight to disappear. It can just stop remembering why it started. Erasing what people know and reporting a lie about what happened on the surface are the same tool pointed in 2 directions. One keeps the population from asking questions. The other keeps the person supposedly leading them from getting real answers. Robert Sims closes off a 3rd channel in the same episode. He confirms to Camille that the drug is already circulating, then admits somebody has started keeping track of his own movements, which means he can't keep feeding information to the resistance without getting caught doing it. Between the false report on the surface, the drug entering the water, and Robert going quiet, Juliette loses 3 separate sources of reliable information inside the space of 1 hour, and 2 of the 3 failures were engineered by people. Bernard hands Juliette an impossible choice in that same stretch of the episode. Destroy Judicial, the department controlling both the memory drug and the gas outlets tied to the safeguard, and risk roughly 1,000 lives in the process, or leave it standing and lose the rebellion to forgetting instead. Every figure attached to that decision, how many people die if Judicial goes down, how much time is left before the water finishes its work, comes from the same reporting chain that just told Camille 2 men were dead when only 1 of them turned out to be. If the algorithm can be wrong about something as final as a death, there's no real reason to assume it's right about the price tag on blowing up Judicial. None of this is new for Silo 18. Go back 1 episode to the critical supply mystery Paul Billings and Hank have been working since Orla Kent turned up dead in a sealed mine shaft, and the same failure shows up again in a much smaller room. Orla took over supply from Glenda Harwood and almost immediately started asking where years worth of stock, bulbs, tools, spare parts had been quietly going. She worked out it wasn't hitting any black market. It was being routed straight into construction, through a path that doesn't appear on any official map of the silo. She told her boyfriend as much the night before she disappeared. Days later, Billings pulls her body out of a tunnel, rebar damage to the back of her head, staged to pass for a rat extermination gone wrong. Billings and Hank eventually strong-armed their way into a surveillance room that was supposed to have been shut down under the new pact, and the footage inside proves the cameras never actually stopped recording. What they find is Glenda Harwood near the mine, and then 10 minutes later, inside critical supply. 10 minutes isn't enough time to make that trip on any stairwell the show has ever shown an audience. Somewhere between those 2 points, there's a route the official blueprints don't account for, and Glenda knows exactly where it is. Everyone chasing the theft assumed that route ran sideways, toward the next silo over, because Camille had already gone looking for a horizontal tunnel back in episode 3, convinced Lucas was digging his way to Silo 17. She gassed half the mine shafts on that theory and found nothing. But Ed Harwood, Glenda's father, and the head of mines told the council at the season's very first meeting that his tunnels run in every direction except outward. Take him at his word, and the shape of Glenda's shortcut stops being a question of direction and turns into a question of height. A 10-minute gap between 2 levels the main stairwell can't explain doesn't need a passage to another silo. It needs a shaft that goes somewhere the blueprints don't. And the one direction of mine that already runs everywhere but out hasn't ruled out is straight up. In that same stretch of episodes, the algorithm tells Juliette that sending Knox and Shirley outside would raise silo-wide risk by 34%, a figure precise enough to sound like it's backed by real data, drawn from camera coverage and radio logs. Every input the system is built to track. Precision like that only means something if the inputs are complete. If Glenda Harwood has spent years moving inventory through a shaft the cameras were never pointed at, then every risk number the algorithm has ever produced for Silo 18 was built on top of a gap nobody, including the algorithm, accounted for. The gap is the actual through line here, more than any single lie from the algorithm or from Camille. Cameras cover the paths people are supposed to use. Radios cover the frequencies people are supposed to talk on. The moment somebody steps outside either one, whether that's Glenda taking an unmapped shaft or Lucas and Kennedy walking past the last working relay tower, the system isn't watching anymore. It's guessing, and reporting the guess back with the exact same flat certainty it uses for everything it actually can see. Graham Yost has said the whole series comes down to one question. Why are these people living underground? And what actually happened to the world above them? Season 3 keeps answering a smaller version of that question at every level of the story before it'll answer the big one. Daniel and Helen sign away their freedom on Stenson's Island and watch a drilling operation that's clearly building towards something enormous. 51 silos spread across roughly 300,000 acres, and they still don't know why. Pierre Stenson himself, played with an unsettling stillness by Colin Hanks, has already got critics wondering out loud whether he's connected to the algorithm somehow, which tells you the show is doing its job. Juliette watches Camille lie to her face about a death that turned out not to be real, and still doesn't know what actually hit Lucas and Kennedy on that surface. Billings finds a shaft that shouldn't exist and still doesn't know where it comes out. Nobody in this show, human or machine, is working from a complete picture, and the ones who last tend to be the ones who catch on to that early and stop treating a report as the same thing as the truth. Collider's been tracking the season's reviews and keeps coming back to the same point: the growing tension between what the algorithm decides and what the people living under it actually choose to do. Episode 7 is the clearest single hour of evidence for that argument the season has produced so far, because it doesn't just show the algorithm making a bad call. It shows a bad call getting treated as certainty, repeated by a person who knows better, and believed by the one person in the room who's usually smart enough not to believe it. 3 episodes are left. Grey Goo lands on August 21st, and given the title, that's a reasonable bet for a straight answer on what actually happened to Charlotte's plane, and maybe to Lucas and Kennedy along with it. Farewell follows a week after that, and the season finale, Troy, closes things out on September 4th. Apple has already confirmed a 4th season to finish the story once this one wraps, so none of this has to resolve cleanly by then. But the gap between what the algorithm reports and what's actually happening on the ground does have to matter by the finale, because episode 7 just spent an entire hour proving that gap is the real story, not a side effect of it.